Using Your Disadvantage to Win, episode 125. Are you ready to make your law firm a profit-generating machine that will free up your time and skyrocket your impact? With more than 2 decades of business growth experience and having proven that you can be successful while prioritizing your family and your impact, introducing the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, the creator of the Firm Differentiator 10X Effect, Moshe Amsel. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Profit with Law podcast. I am your host, Moshe Amsel, and today I am coming to you solo. It's Tuesday, and I wanted to talk about your disadvantages. So how the heck did I get into this? Why am I choosing this topic? So let me give you a little bit of a backstory. I am part of a small group of friends that got together to encourage each other to increase our activity level, be more in tune with our physical health. And somebody in there mentioned that they had started 75 Hard. A few of us checked it out and decided to start it together. Of course, they chose the day to start it as my birthday, so that was August 3rd. The time you're listening to this, it would be about 15 days ago. And so 75 Hard is it's really more of a mental challenge than a physical health challenge. So it's a 75-day program designed by a guy by the name of Andy Frisella, and we'll link. He has a podcast episode where he explains the thought behind it and everything in the program. We'll link that up in the show notes so you can go and listen to that if you're interested. But the crux of it is you have to do 2 45-minute exercise routines a day, one of which must be outdoors. You need to be on some sort of diet, like a real diet. It doesn't matter what kind, because it's not a weight loss program. It's a mental fitness challenge. And you have to read 10 pages a day of a nonfiction book. You got to drink a gallon of water. You got to take a selfie every day. And I think I pretty much covered all the things that you need to do. So that's basically 75 Hard. You got to do that for 75 days. And it is not easy. First of all, finding time for 2 45-minute exercise routines a day has definitely been a struggle. As a matter of fact, last week, I was doing my second exercise routine at 2 in the morning. Like, I was literally running outdoors for 3.5 miles at 2 o'clock in the morning. Because that's just what my schedule allowed. And I was in this vicious cycle where you run at 2 in the morning, then you can't get up early in the morning to do an exercise routine. So once again, I'm stuck doing my first one before dinner, my second one after I get the kids to bed and take care of whatever I needed to take care of on the business front that I couldn't do during the day because of the wonderful gift of COVID and having 2 little ones at home. So I just don't get my work done during the day. Anyway, so I've been doing the 75 Hard program, but to make a long story short, I started reading a book that's been on my shelf for a while. I've wanted to read it for a long time, never got to it, and now I'm into it. And it is David and Goliath by Malcolm Gladwell. The book it's very different than what I expected. So I thought it was a business book going into it. I thought it was, because it's all about underdogs being able to overcome or succeed in an environment where it seems like there's no way to compete against, the big dog. Like, let's say that you wanted to create an operating system software. You'd be competing against Microsoft. You'd be competing against Apple. These are 2 of the largest companies in the world. How do you compete against them? So that's what I thought the book was primarily about, but it's been a real eye-opener because so far every chapter has just been a lot of really well thought out points and just driving the message home of what he's trying to accomplish in the book, which is not specifically about business. I mean, some of the things are, for example, one of the things that was a real eye opener was when Malcolm Gladwell, the author, set out to demonstrate that going to a non-Ivy school is actually an advantage than going to an Ivy school. And he brings an individual example, but then he brings the data from a bunch of studies to demonstrate and prove it. In this example, the subject is somebody who was obsessed with science growing up, got into Brown University, one of the elite schools to get a science degree in. And she ended up dropping out of science because when she got to organic chemistry, she struggled, and her peers, some of them, breezed through it. And when comparing to other students, she felt inadequate. She felt like she couldn't succeed. Her second choice of school was the University of Maryland. There, if she had been in that same class, even with her struggling, she would have been closer to the top of the class. She would not have gotten dejected by her struggles, and she would have likely still been a scientist today. So often when in a situation and, looking at the best option, and you're unable to get the best option, sometimes, very often, you might end up at the advantage, not the disadvantage. But the most recent part of the book that I read is, and for those of you who might be interested in checking the book out, I'll just tell you it's chapter 4, and he talks about dyslexia. And he talks about a gentleman by the name of David, and I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's Boies, David Bois or Boys. I'm not sure. We'll go with Bois. It sounds really cool. But he talks about David Bois. And what's interesting is that it took me halfway through the chapter to find out that he actually ended up becoming an attorney. But first he talks about what dyslexia is and how it's like the biggest disadvantage that you could think of that a person can have. Like, you can't read, or it's very difficult for you to read. And people with dyslexia really struggle to succeed in school, and it causes all kinds of psychological issues because they look dumb or stupid to their peers, and they end up paying the price for that. So this gentleman by the name of David Bois was he had dyslexia, and he struggled in school, and he ended up going into construction, had a pretty good job, but then he had a baby, and his wife started to push him to really do something more meaningful and have a better future with his job. So she brought home brochures, and something caught his attention. He had been interested in law, and he saw a brochure about going to law school and decided that he's going to do that. And he signed up for a small local college where he started out. Now, you would think that somebody with dyslexia would absolutely struggle in law school, and you'd be correct, right? You'd be correct, because there's a lot of learning, there's a lot of reading that needs to happen, and that's exactly what David had to face. But what's interesting is that because of his disadvantage, he had to figure out other ways to accomplish the same goal. In other words, if he had just tried to read everything, there's no way he would have ever succeeded. So instead, the first thing that he found out is that the core classes, which required the most reading, that were required to get a degree, he found out that he can actually go to law school without a degree. So he decided to just skip those core classes and skip his degree, go straight to law school. When he got to law school, he found that he was able to get summaries for all the major cases that he needed to study, or many of them. And he also began to develop and build his ability to listen and retain from listening rather than reading and retaining from reading. When he became an attorney, which he did become, he went into litigation, and he chose litigation because he could use primarily his unique ability to be able to memorize things and didn't have to do a lot of reading. He became a very well-known trial lawyer, and eventually he was the lead trial lawyer in the Microsoft antitrust violation cases back in the 1990s. And he actually was the reason why they were able to win that case, because the key witness, David Blankenhorn, was on the stand, and he, through cross-examinations, recognized certain nuances in the way that David was answering questions that led him to understand where the weaknesses were in the case, where David might be hiding some of the truth. And through that, they were able to figure out where the weak spots were and win the case. He also was involved in Hollingsworth versus Schwarzenegger, which was the California law. I'm sorry, I mixed cases up. So David Blankenhorn was actually the Hollingsworth versus Schwarzenegger, which was the marriage of the law limited marriage to man and woman, and this was trying to overcome that law and define it as unconstitutional, which they ended up winning, and it was because of that testimony of David Blankenhorn. So sorry for messing that one up, but this idea that having a disadvantage that when you look at it can be advantageous for you, it can set you up for success with the way that you hone in on other skills and figure out how to overcome it, is something that is really, when you start to look at it, it really goes back to what we go through as business owners. And as a lawyer who has decided to start your own law firm, one of the early things that I hear, one of the biggest issues is, well, they don't teach business in law school. So we come out a lawyer, and now we're trying to run a business. We don't know how to run a business. That is a disadvantage, right? But the reality is because you don't have this training, because you don't have this knowledge, you need to figure things out for yourself. You need to learn for yourself. And the best way to learn is through action. The best way to learn is to try something and succeed at it or not succeed, learn from that and move on to the next. People who are taught business in school, they think that it needs to be done a certain way. They think it needs to be approached a certain way often, and they might not even think outside the box. They might not come up with the ideas that you're coming up with. So there's definitely advantages to the fact that you don't have that training. Another big one that I hear is, I don't have a lot of capital and I can't get investors. That's not allowed. You can't have a non-lawyer owner in a company. So you can't get investors in this company that you're building, and it becomes very difficult to get the capital that you need. And that is, I'll tell you this. When it comes to business, often somebody, they're starting out in business for the first time, they might take out a large loan that's going to allow them to operate and bring on the people that they need. But what happens is that they tend to make lots of mistakes in those early days. And because they had the money to spend, they made those mistakes at a cost, a financial cost. That's significant. And what happens is many times, business owners who took out loans early in the process of starting their business will say that was the biggest waste of money that they ever had. Like if they had the chance to start over, they would first borrow the money further into the business cycle because you don't know what you're going to need the money for. You don't understand how the business runs. There's a lot of lessons to be learned along the way, and it's too easy to just try to throw money at the problem and use that as your solution. And the reality is that sometimes it requires some sweat equity. Sometimes it requires you to just try things rather than trying to throw money at the problem. So not having capital or not having access to capital at the beginning can be advantageous to you. It can make you do things, figure out how to do things that don't require you to spend money. Figure out how to get some marketing done. Figure out how to bring in your initial clients without spending a lot of money on a marketing agency. Figure out how to bring on staff without needing to hire staff. These are the kinds of things that you need to think about when you're coming up against these challenges. Is this a disadvantage? Are you disadvantaged against other people who are further on in their journey, or somebody who has a lot of money saved up and starting their law firm that way, or somebody who's already hired 3 staff members? Just because somebody's got 4 people on staff doesn't mean that they're any more successful than you. They could have hired those people, and those people are sitting idle in their office. They haven't figured out yet how to delegate responsibility to them. You, with your disadvantage, can bring on a part-time paralegal, can bring on a virtual assistant, can bring on a company to do your whatever it is that you need to do. You bring on an outside contractor to do things, a bookkeeper to do your bookkeeping outside of the firm. Rather than hiring people full-time into that position, by bringing people in piecemeal, part-time, using agencies, you save a ton of money and you learn a lot of lessons along the way. You don't have somebody sitting idle, not working because you don't have the work for them. So there's, this is a huge lesson that we need to recognize and come to terms with, because every time that we run into a disadvantage, what do you do with that? How do you address that? What's interesting is that with dyslexia, there's a significant amount of really successful CEOs that have dyslexia. As a matter of fact, I'm going to open the book and just give you, he rattles off a list. I'll tell you right here. Richard Branson, the British billionaire entrepreneur, is dyslexic. Charles Schwab, the founder of the discount brokerage that bears his name, is dyslexic, as are the cell phone pioneer Craig McCaw, David Neilman, the founder of JetBlue, John Chambers, the CEO of the technology giant Cisco, Paul Orfalea, the founder of Kinko's, to name just a few. So, there's a lot of really successful publicly traded companies, CEOs, that are dyslexic. How does that happen? How is it that such a large percentage of successful business owners are dyslexic? It's because the disadvantage actually gives them an advantage, because what they lack in their ability to read, they pick up other skills, which then become really valuable skills in owning a business. And the point of this is not that you should become dyslexic, right? Or, if you don't have dyslexia, you can't be successful in business. That's not the point. The point is that you have to start to look at your disadvantages, look at the things that you are pinning your lack of success on, and recognize that those disadvantages are actually your advantages. Those things are actually the things that are going to allow you to rise up and become a better business owner. But that can only happen if you can persevere, if you can recognize that these are positive things, and you can then use that as a catalyst, as an energy to take the next step, to take the next action. So many times we have a fear of failure. I spoke about fear, I think it was last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago. We talked about fear and overcoming it. And this goes hand in hand with that. Like, you're only going to recognize the advantage that you have by being disadvantaged if you do something about it. And that's going to require you to think outside the box. That's going to require you to come up with ideas of how to succeed. Recognize what your problem is, recognize what your limitation is, and then find a way around that limitation. And you do that enough times, and you're going to build a resource and energy force behind you that's going to make you a force to be reckoned with. And that's where success is made. That's where successful business owners come from, is the ability to be able to get past the school of hard knocks, to be able to get past all of these lessons and and achieve success after that without giving up, right? So the key is stay in the game, right? Don't give up. You're thinking about throwing the towel in, don't do that. Recognize that the latest failure is just one of the pieces in the string. You know, my mother used to tell us when we were growing up, and I don't know if I said this on the podcast before, but she used to tell us some people learn with their ears and some people learn with their butt. And, you know, so you either listened or you got spanked, and that was the way that you learned. And that's really how it is in real life, right? You know, some people learn by reading a book, by listening to it somebody else has gone through and saying, oh, I'm not going to make that mistake, and they're on guard and they don't make that mistake. And then some people learn by just making the mistake. And some of those mistakes are costly mistakes. You know, I used to listen to Dave Ramsey years ago, and he has a term, stupid tax. You know, that when you spend money on something and you realize afterwards that it was stupid, then as long as you recognize that that was a mistake and you don't do it again, you simply had stupid tax. You simply paid money to learn that lesson. And I think that if we approach all of our lessons in business this way, that when we take a misstep, when we invest in something that was a mistake, when we spend money that we shouldn't have spent, or we realize in hindsight it was not the right vendor that we selected, or it was not the right software that we chose, don't look at it like, oh my gosh, I threw all this money away and now we have nothing to show for it. No, you have something to show for it. You figured out, you got more clear on what it is that you're looking for. You figured out this is not for you. You're not going to use it anymore. You can move on to the next thing. You know, you tried a virtual paralegal service and realized this is not working. I need to have a paralegal in-house. Well, good, because now you figured out that's what you need. And you can move into that decision with much more surety than, I'm not sure if this is the right move. Should I bring somebody in-house? Should I go virtual? Okay, I'm going to choose in-house. Well, you already demonstrated the other option was not the right one for you. So now you're more certain with your decision. You know, one of the hardest things that you can do is raise a child. Many of my listeners are parents. And the thing is that when you have your first child, it comes out without an instruction manual. There's nobody there to give you instructions every step of the way. This is what you do now. This is what you do now. Follow this Lego instruction manual to build your child up into an adult. No, you have to figure it out. And guess what? Us parents, we make mistakes. We make a ton of mistakes all the time. My kids will be the first to tell you how many mistakes I've made. Not that they tell me how many mistakes I've made, but I know when I'm wrong. I know when I do something that I feel badly about, that I wish I could take back as a parent. But each time that I make a mistake, I become a better parent. Each time I make a mistake, I recognize that I did something wrong or had a misstep, and I learn from that, and I become a better parent. And now that I have 5 kids, I'm a far better parent than I was when my first daughter was born, more than 20 years ago. And this is, building a business is the second most difficult thing that you can do. The first most difficult thing is raising a child. And if you are successfully raising a child, then you can definitely build a business. But let's look at the stages of a child and how it correlates to a business, right? When a child's first born, they're an infant. They can't fend for themselves. They rely completely and absolutely on the mother and father to take care of their every need. They need to be fed. They cannot go to their food. It needs to be brought to them. It needs to be prepared for them in a way because they can't chew it. They need to just swallow it, so it needs to be liquid. They can't change their own diaper, or they can't go to the bathroom. And you get the idea, right? They can't walk. They can't crawl. So you have to carry them from place to place and put them. They can't do anything on their own other than drinking and pooping and peeing, right? That's it, and breathing. And everything else you got to do for them. Then they start to grow past that infant stage. And at 3 months, they start to maybe do a little bit of crawling. Maybe they're doing a little bit of rolling over or holding themselves up on their elbows. And that starts to get stronger and stronger. And eventually they start to get mobile. And then they learn to stand. And then they learn to walk. Then they start to learn to talk. And then from there, they learn to feed themselves. They learn to get dressed by themselves. They learn to bathe. They learn to read. They learn to understand things and become students of life. They learn to play. All of those stages that we go through raising our kids, those are the same stages you go through with a business. When you start your business cannot survive without you. It is completely dependent on you. You need to nurture it. You need to find it clients. You need to deliver the service to those clients. You need to collect money. You need to pay the expenses. You need to do those things, and it all starts there. And then as you grow the business, your job, what's your job as a parent? Your job as a parent is to build a successful adult, somebody who can leave your home, somebody who can go on their own and fend for themselves and be a successful living being in the world. I'm not talking about somebody with special needs or anything like that. I'm talking about your normal, typical situation. Your business is the same. What is the goal of your business? The goal of your business is to get the business to a point that it's able to go out in the world and exist on its own without you. Whether it means that you're going to eventually sell it to somebody else, or it just means that you're going to not be busy every single day with your business. At some point, that's the goal of the business. And if you look at the stages of a child and understand that this is your business, you have stages, and at every stage of the way, you're going to come across challenges, and you don't have an instruction manual. You're disadvantaged. You haven't learned the lessons that are out there to learn, but you have the ability to learn them. And you start to embrace that. Every time you make a mistake, you should be celebrating. This is another win. The fact that I took this misstep, the fact that I made this mistake, it's a win because now I've learned a valuable lesson and I can move on to the next thing. Take your disadvantages and recognize the advantage it creates. And with that, I think that you're going to absolutely crush it. I think that you're going to make amazing strides in your business. This is more of an inspirational talk than a actual take action kind of episode. But I think every once in a while we need to hear it, right? Every once in a while, although we know in our hearts that we have what it takes, we know in our hearts that we can be successful. We know in our hearts that we can go out there and we can rule the world. You're a good attorney. You know what you need to do for your clients, but that's not what it takes to be a successful business owner. You need to have a big heart, but you need to also recognize that there are things that you need to learn and overcome. You need to learn who your target market is. You need to learn how to talk to them. You need to learn how to find them. You need to learn how to market to them, bring them in, have an endless stream of leads coming in. You need to learn how to build staff, how to create processes and systems, how to choose and implement technology, or find the right vendors to do that for you. But you need to learn all these things, and it's all in due process. It's all in due time. You don't need to know them all on day one when you start. You don't need to know them even a couple of years in. You think a parent of a 2-year-old is worried about how to teach their child to drive a car? No, they don't think about it. You don't have to worry about it yet. So when you haven't figured out how to bring in consistent clients, and you haven't figured out how to maximize your time in serving clients and bringing in new ones, you're not quite ready yet to start hiring staff, because you have to learn how to manage your own time first. You have to learn how to be able to organize the work that you're doing in a way that you can then hand it off to somebody else. So although I'm a big proponent of hiring before you're not ready when you don't have the ability to dictate to somebody else what you need them to do. So you have to build that ability for yourself. You got to give yourself time to do that. You got to give yourself the ability to learn from mistakes and to move forward and get to that stage. There aren't any shortcuts when it comes to building a business. Now, yes, if you have a decent amount of capital to spend and you've gone through and learned the mistakes you needed to learn, then that money can definitely help you propel your business forward faster. If you get certain steps right, you're going to become a far better parent that much more quickly. In other words, you don't have to make all the mistakes. If you get your niche dialed in so specifically that you become the only attorney to do X, Y, or Z, that's very likely going to propel you way faster in your journey. So some people get lucky, and some people it takes skill, and they did it purposely. But often people get lucky when they have very, very rapid growth, and that doesn't always last. Think of the people who win a lottery. They're millionaires, and then you go back, and 3 years later, 5 years later, they've got nothing left to their name. Why does that happen? Because they haven't gone through the process of earning that over time. They haven't learned the lessons of what not to spend money on and how important it is to save for the future. Instead, they're suddenly wealthy, and then suddenly they're not. Business owners who accidentally become successful are suddenly successful, and then all of a sudden they're suddenly not. Doesn't always work that way. Sometimes they stay successful. I don't want to bash anybody or get nasty emails from you guys saying how wrong I am. But often that's the case because learning things by overcoming your disadvantages, by training yourself to step through these issues and overcome them, and building this repository of mistakes that you've learned not to do again is the best way to achieve success in the long run. So, folks, stick with it. Celebrate your losses just as much as you celebrate your wins. And until next time, I hope that you keep it real, keep it profitable, and I will catch you Thursday. We've got a great interview coming up Thursday. And let me just look and see what's on the horizon for us for episode 126. I've got Curtis Wadsworth coming on the show. So stay tuned for that. This coming Thursday. We'll see you then. Take care. Thank you for tuning into the Profit with Law podcast. Your feedback is extremely valuable to us, as well as helping us reach more people with this valuable content. Please leave us a rating and review in your favorite podcast directory. Join us again next time when we are back with even more strategies to profit with law.